Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shrudvaharastamanaratthi nama pramayas. Chakra yadu patagala jabuja dirudha. Chakrena nakravadanam vinipachatasmad. Taste pragya bhagavan kripayo jahada. Shrudva, by hearing. Harihi, the personality of Godhead. Tam, him. Arana atanam, one who is in need of help. Apramaya, the unlimitedly powerful Lord. Chakra, will. Ayudaha, equipped with his weapon. Patagaraja, the king of the birds, Garuda. Buja Adirudaha, being seated on the wings of. Chakrena, by the will. Nakravadanam, the mouth of the crocodile. Vinipacha, cutting in two. Tasmat, from the mouth of the crocodile. Haste, in the hands. Pragraha, taking hold of the trunk. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Kripaya, out of causeless mercy. Ujahada, delivered him. Translation per Bhagavad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the personality of Godhead, after hearing the elephant's plea, felt that the elephant needed his immediate help, for he was in great distress. Thus at once the Lord appeared there on the wings of the king of birds, Garuda, fully equipped with his weapon, the will, chakra. With that will he cut to pieces the mouth of the crocodile to save the elephant, and he delivered the elephant by lifting him by his trunk. Purport: the Lord resides in his Vaikuntha planet. No one can estimate how far away this planet is situated. It is said, however, that anyone trying to reach that planet by airships or by mine ships travelling for millions of years will find it still unknown. Modern scientists have invented airships which are material, and the yogis make a still finer material attempt with the help of mine ships. But neither the airship nor the mine ship has access to the kingdom of God in the Vaikuntha Loka, situated far beyond the material sky. Since this is the situation, how was it possible for the prayers of the elephant to be heard from such an unlimitedly distant place? And how could the Lord at once appear on the spot? Those things cannot be calculated by human imagination. All this was possible by the unlimited power of the Lord, and therefore the Lord is described here as Apramaya. For not even the best human brain can estimate his powers and potencies by mathematical calculation. The Lord can hear from such a distant place, he can eat from there, and he can appear simultaneously in all places at a moment's notice. Such is the omnipotency of the Lord. So we're hearing from Lord Brahma speaking to Narada Muni. Narada Muni was asking so many questions of Lord Brahma. So this chapter, scheduled incarnations, we heard at the verse in the previous chapter that I shall state one after another incarnations of the Lord known as Lila avatars. Hearing of their activities counteracts all foul matters accumulated in the air. These pastimes are pleasing to hear and are to be relished, therefore they are in my heart. So scheduled incarnations, so when we talk about scheduled, it means if you have a daily schedule, it means you've got certain things you need to do at certain times. So scheduled incarnation, in this sense, means that they can be predicted or calculated. So if somebody presents to you that I am God, you should worship me, there are some criteria that can be established. Is this person telling the truth? Or is it just somebody with issues? Generally we hear in Bhagavatam that different avatars, incarnations, the parent's name, or at least the father's name is given, the yuga which they're appearing, the village where they're appearing, what their particular mission is, etc., etc. So with Lila avatars, of course, Lila means pastime. So these different personalities appearing according to schedule, and because they're mentioned in Bhagavatam, they can be accepted as bona fide incarnations or avatars of the Supreme Lord. So whether it's a Lila avatar or Manvantara or Shaktivesh avatar, etc., many different avatars are there. But ultimately it's the original source is Krishna himself. So we hear from Bhagavad Gita that the chapter of the universal form, it's not that Arjuna really wanted to see that universal form, because when it did appear before him, he became actually quite disturbed and frightened, and after some time he said, enough of this, go back to your original two-handed form. But the understanding was that if somebody claims to be God or an avatar incarnation, Krishna, he can show his potency by presenting, a universal form. So if somebody can't present some sort of, extraordinary activity or pastime such as showing universal form, etc., it means he's not fulfilling the criteria. Just materially speaking, if you're trying to find a doctor or a lawyer, there's certain criteria. They have to make sure that they're actually qualified from a recognised school or college, and that their peers, they recommend him as a good doctor. His other patients or clients, they say, yes, he's good, he knows what he's doing, etc., etc. There's certain criteria, just materially speaking. So, sometimes we have people either say or online, they're questioning, why doesn't God just appear before us to prove that he's real? But many people have got no idea what God looks like. If somebody was to say, I'm God, how do they know it's not him or her? So some information is required. So from Bhagavatam, Vedic scripture, we have full description of who Krishna is. Of course, we have the primary Dasavatar, the 10 primary avatars. There's unlimited avatars, but these 10 are given as sort of primary, in that they're a mixture of species, if you like. Some are animal avatars in animal form or aquatic form, etc. But it just shows the variegatedness of Krishna's power and potency, that he can appear and do anything he wants. So we're hearing this particular pastime. It was probably covered quite a bit in yesterday's verse. This is just carrying on. the elephant known as Gajendra. Of course, Gajendra, Gaja means elephant, Indra means king, so he was the king of the elephants. And we hear this pastime was also more expounded in the 8th canto, that wherever he went, all the other animals in the jungle immediately fled because he was such a powerful, fearful animal, king of the elephants. Taking bath in the river, and then by providence, a crocodile came along and grabbed hold of the leg of Gajendra, and so that struggle went on for a very long time. And but it's an interesting history of Gajendra and the crocodile. Gajendra, of course, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but it's just nice to hear again that in the previous life, Gajendra, his name was King Indradyumna. And after some time, King Indradyumna, he retired from his royal position and went to the forest to meditate. And while he was in his ashram, Augusta Muni, or Augusta Rishi, came with his disciples. But because King Indradyumna was completely absorbed in his meditation, he didn't receive Augusta Rishi properly. According to Augusta Rishi's idea anyway, he'd become a bit offended that I'm a great sage and this king, he's not receiving us properly. So he'd become very angry, and he cursed the king to become an elephant. So in accordance with this curse, the next life he took birth as an elephant. But when he was in the time of distress, when the crocodile was there and they were fighting for so long, and he thought, all my female elephants can't help me, or nobody else can help me. And in that time of extreme distress, he remembered even though in an elephant body, he remembered the prayers that he was chanting in his previous life as King Indradyumna. So he started chanting those prayers, which are all mentioned in the 8th canto. And as a result, to reciprocate with his devotee in distress, Krishna appeared on the back of his carrier, Garuda. So it's also the history of who was the elephant, the crocodile. So there was one king. He was swimming in a river on one of the Gandharva planets with his wives, and he was just playfully, swimming with his wives. And by accident, he managed to pull the leg of Devela Rishi, who was also taking bath at that time. So that Rishi, he'd become angry and cursed. Actually, his name was King Huhu, the Gandharva king. And so he cursed the king, that you're acting like a crocodile coming from underneath and pulling my leg. I curse you to be a crocodile. And so, but King Huhu become very, sort of sorry and begged for forgiveness. And Devela Rishi became a little bit compassionate and gave him the benediction that he would be freed from that curse when Gajendra the elephant was also delivered by the personality of Godhead. So we see that Gajendra and the crocodile, they were both delivered at the same time. So it's mentioned that Gajendra the elephant, he received what's called Sarupya Mukti, that he took on the same spiritual body as Lord Narayan or Vishnu in the Vaikuntha planets. So, and similarly, the crocodile was similarly liberated. So that's sort of the background of Gajendra, of this particular pastime, Gajendra the elephant. As I said, it's expanded over about 3 chapters in the 8th canto, but this is just a short overview. So it's mentioned that when the Lord appeared, he came on the back of his carrier, Garuda. So Garuda is quite an interesting personality, actually. We'll just cover a few different points here. So Garuda, of course we know the form of Garuda, he appears as sort of like half human, half bird, sort of like a human body and a bird head and wings. I think there's like a Murti of Garuda down near the lake paddock there that Mahamantra is established. But so Garuda, he was born of Kashyapa Rishi. So Kashyapa Rishi had two wives, Vaniti and Kadru, and so Vaniti became Garuda's mother. And Garuda also had a brother, Aruna, who happens to be, he's the charioteer of Surya, or the sun god, as the sun god travels in his chariot, and Aruna is the charioteer. So a lot of different pastimes, stories about Garuda. We also have the Garuda Purana. There's 18 different Puranas, and Garuda, so those 18 are divided into 3 different categories. One group is Sattvic Purana, for those in the mode of goodness, and the Rajasic Puranas, those in the mode of passion, and the Tamasic Puranas, those in the mode of ignorance. So it's not that the Puranas are influenced by those modes, it's for people who are under those modes. So therefore, like the Tamasic Puranas, therefore, like people who are worshipping Lord Shiva, etc., presents Lord Shiva as the Supreme Person, just to try to encourage them a little bit. But so the Garuda Purana is in the Sattvic category, and it contains a conversation between Vishnu and Garuda, covers lots of different topics such as death, afterlife, sin, life in hell, location of hell, Yamaraj, the Lord of death or the underworld, and his assistant, secretary, Chitragupta, a description of the city of Yamaraj, the various kinds of punishments meted out to the sinners, how to avoid sin upon earth, what types of funeral rites should be performed for the departed, and what happens when they're not performed, etc., etc. We're here in the 5th canto, description of all these different punishments, etc. All that's all coming from this Garuda Purana. So if you're interested in those sort of topics, that's the place to go. The Garuda Purana. So and Garuda, he's actually quite famous in many different countries, primarily a little bit due to Hindu influence, but primarily due to Buddhist influence. Like we all know, in Indonesia they have the Garuda Airlines. So as the national airlines, Bali and Java, Garuda has become the cultural symbol. And has anybody seen in Bali the big statue of Garuda? Apparently it's 75 metres high of Garuda. So quite big. So he's very much part of that culture. In China, due to the influence, well, they have their sort of gods and demons sort of influenced by Buddhism, but Garuda's considered part of that sort of that culture to some degree. In Japan, they have a divine creature in the form of Garuda. This is coming from sort of Buddhist influence in Japan. Mongolia is the symbol of the capital of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar. They use Garuda, and the prime Mongolian soccer team is called the Garuda team as well. So in Myanmar, the Burmese epics influenced by Hindu Buddhist belief, Garuda, he's known as the enemy of the snakes. Nepal, he's very much part of that tradition. Philippines also, and in Thailand as well. Thailand has Garuda on one of their banknotes. So from the Bhagavatam 10th canto, there's a story which involves Sabari Muni, which Garuda is part of. So I'm just going to read short, see, it's just sort of paraphrasing chapter 17 from the 10th canto, that King Parikshit inquired, why did Kaliya leave Ramanaka Island, the abode of the serpent? So this is one of the islands where Garuda was living, because it was the island of the serpents or snakes, and Garuda, the natural foodstuffs of Garuda was snakes or serpents. So that's where he was living. And so King Parikshit, hearing this different pastime, I think it was after the Kaliya Leela, once Kaliya was chastised by Krishna, and Maharaj Parikshit was asking Sukadeva Goswami sort of more about this story. So he was asking, why did Kaliya leave that island where he was living, and why did Garuda become so antagonistic towards Kaliya? So Sukadeva Goswami said to avoid being eaten by Garuda on that island, Ramanaka Island, the serpents had previously made an arrangement with him whereby they would each make a monthly offering of tribute at the base of the tree. In other words, a snake was selected each month to sacrifice themselves for Garuda's foodstuff, rather than Garuda just randomly grabbing any snake, anyone. So they made some sort of arrangement like that. So thus every month on schedule, each serpent would make his offering to Garuda as a purchase of protection. However, the king of the serpents, Kaliya, would eat all those offerings before Garuda could claim them. So thus Kaliya directly defied the carrier of Lord Vishnu. So Garuda became angry when he heard of this and rushed toward the serpent. Kaliya, who had the weapon of poison, raised his numerous heads to counteract and try to bite Garuda. But to avoid this attack, Garuda struck the son of Kadru, Kaliya, with his left wing, which was shining like gold. Beaten by Garuda's wing, Kaliya was extremely distraught, and thus he took shelter of a lake adjoining the river Jamuna. So that's where we know the Kaliya lake, where Krishna jumped in to chastise Kaliya's serpent, because he was, by his poison, he was killing everything in that area. So, but it happened that Garuda, however, could not enter this lake. So Maharaj Parikshit, he was asking, so why Garuda couldn't enter there? So this goes into another story, that in that very lake, Garuda had once desired to eat a fish, because serpents and fish, these are the foods of eagles or birds such as Garuda. So although forbidden by the sage Sabari, who happened to be meditating underwater in that area at that time, Garuda took courage, and feeling hungry seized the fish. So just a short purport to that verse, that it is by Prabhupada, it is the nature of birds to eat fish, and thus by the arrangement of the Lord, Garuda does not commit any offence by eating fish. In other words, Garuda is not exactly vegetarian. On the other hand, Sabari Muni's forbidding a much greater personality to eat his normal food did not constitute an offence. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sabari committed two offences. First, he dared to give an order to a supremely exalted soul like Garuda, and second, he obstructed Garuda from satisfying his desire. So we know, as a result of those offences, Sabari, even though he was a great yogi meditating underwater for like many thousands of years, I think it was, just through his mystic potency, but his mind became agitated, and he had to give up his meditation. So it was the result of the offence to Garuda that he wanted to give an order to his superior, and he was obstructing Garuda in that way. So it goes on that, seeing how the unfortunate fish in that lake had become most unhappy at the death of one of their fish, Sabari uttered the following curse under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. However, Prabhupada mentions in the purport that in this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that when a so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it merely causes a disturbance. Because Sabari had forbidden Garuda's coming to the lake, Kalia moved in and made his headquarters there. So because of that curse that Garuda couldn't come, Kalia understood that he was going to be safe there. But as a result, this spelled doom for all the lake's residents, because all his poison killed the fish anyway. So in other words, the point there that if one is thinking out of sentimental compassion, they're making some sort of arrangement that doesn't tally or is not in agreement with the arrangement of Krishna, it simply creates a disturbance. So also it is said that the flapping of the wings of Garuda vibrates the Samaveda. 3:21-34 from the Bhagavatam. The sage stood listening as the hymns forming the basis of the Samaveda were vibrated by the flapping wings of the Lord's carrier Garuda. So in the Vedic literature it is stated that the two wings of the transcendental bird Garuda, who carries the Lord everywhere, are two divisions of the Samaveda known as Brihat and Ratantara. Garuda works as the carrier of the Lord, therefore he is considered the transcendental prince of all carriers. With his two wings, Garuda begins to vibrate the Samaveda, which is chanted by great sages to pacify the Lord. There's a couple of different stories about involving Garuda as well. There was one crow who was sitting on a tree, and he noticed that Yamaraj was looking at him and smiling very intently. And the crow became very frightened because, of course, Yamaraj is like death personified. So in his mind, he meditated on Garuda to come to save him, because, the crow and Garuda, obviously they're both birds. So the crow took shelter of Garuda. So Garuda appeared and, understanding the situation, immediately put the crow on his back and took him to the moon planet and said, "You'll be safe here." And then Garuda came back and he confronted Yamaraj. So, "Why are you scaring my brother bird, the crow?" And the Yamaraj said, "Well, I wasn't really trying to scare him. I was just sort of interested because that crow is due to leave its body today, but it's due to leave his body on the moon, and I was wondering how the crow was going to get there." So, and there are different versions of that story, but that's the one that I heard. And of course, the story of Garuda, that the sparrow had its eggs in a nest just on the beach, and the waves were coming and took washed the eggs into the ocean, and so the sparrow became very distraught and threatened the ocean, "If you don't bring my eggs back, I'm going to swallow the whole ocean up." And of course Varuna, the ocean personified, just laughed and said, "You're a little bird, how can you swallow me up?" But anyway, nevertheless, the swallow started just tiny little mouthfuls of the ocean, and but word eventually got to Garuda that this little sparrow was trying to drink the ocean. So Garuda came and threatened the ocean, "If you don't bring the eggs back, then I'm going to start drinking the ocean." And then that Varuna relented and gave back the eggs. So anyway, Garuda appears in many different stories. He's the primary carrier of Lord Vishnu and extraordinary personality. So some of the points about this pastime with Gajendra, as I said, it might have been mentioned before. This is the second verse on that pastime. But it's also, we hear about Prabhupada saying that the Lord resides in the Vaikuntha planet, but nevertheless he heard he heard the prayers of Gajendra the elephant, and even though we can't estimate how far away the Vaikuntha planets are, we've got the total material manifestation made up of practically unlimited material universes, but this only makes up no more than 1/4 of the total cosmic manifestation, and so the Vaikuntha planets are beyond the material realm. But nevertheless, by his unlimited potency, Krishna was able to hear those prayers and immediately reciprocated by coming with Garuda and saved the elephant from his difficult situation. So Prabhupada mentions that the scientists have invented material airships, and even the yogis, they have ever finer, he calls them mind ships. So when the living entity, the soul, leaves the material body, it's encased within the subtle body, mind, intelligence and false ego. So in that subtle body, the yogi can transfer themselves to other planets by their mystic power. But despite that, it's not that they can go beyond the material the material realm. And even within one universe, we have it's said to be 2 billion miles wide universe. But after that, there's the 8 layers: earth, water, air, fire, mind, intelligent, false ego. So you've got 8 different layers, and each layer is 10 times thicker than the last. So that's just each universe. But despite that, so of course Krishna was in the heart of every living entity as the super soul. So he's understanding everything that's going on with every different living entity, and if one of his devotees is in a difficult situation, then he's always aware, because he's everywhere, he's always aware of what's going on. But this is beyond, material calculation to understand how this is going on. And we had the story of Draupadi, when she was being disrobed in the assembly house by, I think it was Dushashan, I think it was one of the Kauravas, and she was trying to hold on to her cloth, but she's just a young girl, and is a big warrior trying to take off her cloth. So in the end, all she could do was put up her hands and, "Hey Krishna, hey Govinda," just surrender to Krishna. And we know the story from Mahabharata that Krishna arranged that the sari was unlimited. As much cloth was pulled off, the cloth remained on her, so therefore her chastity was protected. And it's mentioned that Draupadi asked Krishna later that, "Why did it take you so long to help me?" And he said, "Well, if you called out to Super Soul, I would have been there immediately, but you asked for me, Krishna, and at that time I was in Dwarka, so it took a little bit longer for me to come," like that. So, but nevertheless, Krishna will always protect his devotees. Anyway, these are just some points from this verse. So I'll end there. Thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments. Yes, you've got a microphone.
Thank you for the class. You mentioned about Savari Muni and how he had sentimental compassion for the fish. So how would you define the sentimental compassion in the case of us as aspiring devotees practicing, and how to avoid falling into the trap of sentimental compassion?
Well, sentimental means senses in the mind. And, a devotee should really be thinking beyond that, in the sense that seeing Krishna's transcendental arrangement.